Hey guys, what's going on? Welcome back to another episode here, and in this episode we're going to be checking out my Bioactive ciliaris aberrans enclosure. So this enclosure here was actually the first one that I did with the tile pointing method, and it's holding up very well. I got to say, I'm really impressed with this stuff and how well and how durable it is. Granted, there's only a couple of tiny little geckos in here and it's not being blasted with water and heat and all the rest of it, but this enclosure is probably my favourite one out of the lot of them thus far. Couple of reasons. I just actually like the rock structure in here and just the basic cracks and stuff like that, but I'm really in love with this plant at the moment as well. So any of you keen-eyed subscribers out there that saw the original video, you'll notice that this plant isn't the same as what I originally put in there. So originally I put in a form of grevillea and also a myoporum, like a little succulent essentially down the front here. Unfortunately the grevillea went very quickly. It was probably, when I say quickly, it was within a couple of months of doing the video that it actually dropped off. And the myoporum stuck around for a very long time, but it just kind of very slowly degraded over time. So I decided to swap it out, and I ended up putting in this common everlasting. This is another native Australian shrub. Really cool plant, pretty cheap plant. I think it cost me like 12 bucks or something like that, maybe from my local native nursery. When I first put this in there, it went through a whole bunch of struggles itself. It ended up almost dying back to nothing, but I decided to kind of wait it out and see how we went with it and see if I could actually get it to come good again. As you can see, currently it is absolutely thriving and loving life. And I think what's happened is I think it's been able to get its roots down into the bottom of the enclosure, so right into the drainage layer. I can't see that that's happened, but that's what I'm assuming's happened. So it's able to wick up that moisture from the bottom of the enclosure and, you know, sustain its actual plant growth. Currently it's going through a hell of a lot of growth too. There's all new shoots popping up everywhere. And the whole time that this enclosure's been together, there's always been flowers, these bright yellow flowers on it. And these personally remind me of like little desert bushes. So these are just something that I think are a really cool plant, and I will probably end up trying them out in a few other enclosures here. Maybe even for my tristis down the line, just to see if they can hold up with a bit more heat. As far as the lighting on this enclosure, not much has changed there. The only thing that's changed is I have just taken away one of the LED downlight pucks. No real reason for it, I just figured that I could actually space it out onto another enclosure down here with some plants and see if this thing came good, and it seems to be holding up with a lot of the light there. So something I did end up doing is I ended up buying myself a nice little pair of Aquascaping Shears from work. So these are just used for planted aquariums essentially, with a nice little curved angle on there so you can kind of get into different areas in an aquarium. And I got these because I thought it would be really handy inside terrariums such as this to just kind of cut off any old dead growth or anything like that. And it has been really handy to be able to kind of snip down the bottom of the bush there and kind of just get any of that dead growth off, so then the plant's not putting that energy towards like dead leaves and stuff like that, so it can put it into new fresh growth. And since doing this a couple of times and actually cutting it back a little bit, it's done it a world of good, and it's come back and bounced into life essentially. The geckos themselves, man, they've taken this with absolute ease. You know, they're very happy in here, they're eating, they're doing everything they should be doing. The female's looking really fat too, so she's got a nice amount of body condition to her. The male's pretty good, but he's a little bit more on the lean side. He still hunts his crickets and stuff very easily. The only downside to this enclosure is these little cracks are really good for the crickets to get into. So sometimes they hide out in there for a little bit. And this enclosure being in the bedroom too can mean that sometimes I have to get up at about 1 or 2 in the morning to go hunting for a cricket that's chirping so my wife can sleep. So apart from that, this enclosure is really good. The geckos absolutely love this shrub too. They're right over in the back at the moment, kind of hiding out of sight, out of mind, but they're right underneath that back LED light and a little bit closer to the UVB. They like to hide down there during the day, just kind of out of sight and out of mind, and then at night they'll be running all around these branches at the front here, chasing down whatever's hanging out, cruising around on the desert floor down here as well, checking everything out. Something that I have seen happen though is I have seen an absolute boom in springtails in this enclosure, and I have put a little bit more water in here than what I usually would, just to try to get that plant really settled. So sometimes you might find that the sand stays a little bit wet, moist, I'll call it moist, it's not wet. But in saying that, it seems to be pretty good at the moment. I kind of give it a good water once a week, then let it dry out. So it's kind of good because the geckos get a little bit of humidity in this little microclimate. And I'll let it dry out. It also means the water gets down into the base of the enclosure, and that in turn then can be wicked up by the plant's roots. So yeah, I've seen an absolute boom in springtails. There has been a little bit of like I want to say it's like maybe like a fungi or something like that growing underneath where the water bowl is, but the springtails have been able to kind of sort that out once their population boomed. I haven't seen many slaters getting around anymore, so I'm assuming that the geckos may have actually picked those off just because I've not been feeding them as regularly, just being cooler at the moment. So I may have to repopulate that at some stage as well. The leaf litter in here is all fresh. I've just put this in the last few days just because the other stuff had already decomposed down and had been absorbed in by the earth. It's kind of funny how often you actually have to do that with the leaf litter for these bioactive terrariums, but it's all food for the organics and stuff that are in here, and any sort of like little microorganisms. Something that I have found really handy in cleaning the terrarium is just a simple pair of tongs. Like these are just feeding tongs. But I also have another pair that I actually use to pick up feces and stuff like that throughout the terrariums. And it makes it easy to kind of get in between all the branches and just spot clean any of the bigger particulates that the springtails obviously can't consume. So these geckos are absolute monsters. They're honestly becoming a very favourite genus of geckos of mine. I'm really loving the Strophurus. And these guys get to a pretty decent size. They can get a little bit bigger than this, but this is pretty much adult size, so I'm finding that this enclosure is a great size for these guys here. These guys are such beautiful geckos. They're honestly so ornate. They've got these beautiful little eyelashes on them, these big steely orange eyes, and all these little tubercle spines all up and down their body. I've just popped it back in the enclosure for now. I don't really handle these guys as per many of my geckos. I don't find them a very good animal for that at all, and wouldn't recommend it to most people that want to get into geckos. But yeah, I thought I'd just bring you guys along for a few ups and downs as far as what this enclosure's gone through over the last couple of months. I'm really glad that this common everlasting has decided to live in there. It's really bringing the enclosure quite together, and the bright yellow flowers on top of the red background with all the rocks and stuff there is absolutely awesome. In contrasting with the green leaves on it as well, they're kind of big broad leaves for such a small little shrub. I think it's quite cool personally, but yeah, guys, thank you for joining me on this quick little video, this quick little update on my bioactive Strophurus ciliaris aberrans enclosure. I hope you guys really enjoy this video. Make sure to drop it a like, give it a comment down below, and make sure to subscribe to the channel too. And guys, if you want to support the channel even further, you can go and check me out over on Patreon, and also on Teespring as well if you want to buy some merch. Okay, that's enough from me and my little northern spiny tail mates. So guys, we'll check you out on the next video. Take it easy.